Okay, we'll make a start. Excuse my ridiculous sounding voice, but it's decided to croak out on me. So I'll make my comments quite brief. First of all, welcome to SVA, to those of you visiting. You're in the MA Department of Design Research, Writing and Criticism, and you're here for our Tuesday night lecture series, which has been radically prototyped and redesigned to be a Monday night lecture series tonight for our guest speaker. We just have, I don't know quite what's happened there, but something's happened with the type. But anyway, we have Kiosk coming next week. And after that, the last one is with Beatrice Galilee. So please do come along for those. We are accepting applications for the program right now, so if you know anyone interested in joining us, then do send them my way. There's a few ways they can find out about it. Best way is probably to go to the website, which is designresearch.sva.edu. Follow us on Twitter and all of that good stuff. And you could also stay for the drinks afterwards and chat to me or one of the students. There are some, actually quite a lot now, of videos, 211, wow, videos of our previous lectures, which you can see on our Vimeo page, so you can go check that out, Vimeo Decrypt. All right, so here in the department, we mostly express our critical commentary about design through writing. That writing may end up as different things, as exhibitions or podcasts, videos, and events, but it always starts out as writing, and that's what we spend most of our time learning. But there is, of course, another medium through which critique and commentary can be conveyed, and that's through design itself. Designed objects or products in which critical questions are actually or provocations are actually embedded. Although it has its genetic heritage in the radical design movement of the 1960s, it is mainly in the last decade or so that this species of design practice has become much more widely known, mainly due to a proliferation of exhibitions on the topic. Referred to variously as speculative design, design for discourse, design fiction, or critical design, and many other monikers, many of its main players are connected to the Design Interactions programme at the Royal College of Art in London, directed by Anthony Dunn. Over the years at Decrypt, we've heard from some of those practitioners involved in the field. The other half of Dunn and Raby, Fiona Raby, Elio Cacavale, also from the RCA, and closer to home here in New York, Jonathan Olivares and Antenna Design. We've also heard from those attempting to translate the principles of critical design to what they're starting to call now critical graphic design, and these include groups like MetaHaven and Abaque. So I'm really fascinated by this branch of design practice and always eager to learn more about the ways in which design things can convey questions about the way we live and how this kind of design might operate alongside the work that we do, as design researchers, writers, and critics, dealing with criticism in its written forms. What can we, as researchers, learn from the research practices and methods and attitude towards iteration and prototyping that shape projects like this? Just a fifth dimensional camera. Were you going to be mentioning this later? Maybe? Okay. But embedded in this particular project are some pretty heavy questions, like, are we inhabiting just one of an infinite number of parallel worlds? And if so, what does that say about our place in existence? So this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with. Or this drone project, which fast forwards to the near future when civilian drones will occupy our skies and, really asks the question about how they're going to impact our lives. So we clearly need someone to help us navigate these speculations and speculate on their applications, hence our speaker tonight. Indian-born and London-based Anab Jain has an MA in Interaction Design from the Royal College of Art and is founder and director of the firm Superflux. Within the firm, which she founded in 2009, Anab leads the consultancy's client partnerships, and there's a bunch of these, but they include Sony, the government of the UAE, Nokia, Microsoft Research, Prince's Foundation, and the NHS, which is, for those of you not English, the National Health Service, whilst also nurturing the other part of the studio known as the lab, which is the part devoted to more conceptual and self-initiated projects. These projects include some of the stuff I just showed you, and also a futurescaping workshop for the students at Head Geneva, edible Christmas cards, and new interfaces for prosthetic vision, a part of which we see pictured here. Anab's work has been exhibited at MoMA. You probably saw it in the exhibition called Talk to Me, back in 2011. It's also been at Tate Modern, the Science Gallery Dublin, National Museum of China, and the London Design Festival. Anab is also a TED Fellow and speaks regularly all over the world. In fact, I think you can see Superflux's exhibition work and speaking work as actually just another tool or method which they use in their repertoire. We're very lucky that Anab agreed to visit us on her way to Chicago, Ann Arbor, and Detroit. And she's here to talk to us about technological acceleration, cultural turbulence, and where a critical design practice fits in relation to these states of anxiety. So, to help get us as anxious as possible, please welcome Anab Jain.
Thank you, Alice. That was probably the best introduction and the best way of putting our work. Maybe I'll use this. Thank you so much. It's just an absolute pleasure to be here today. I love New York. I'm not here enough, and this is lovely. This is intimate and nice and just perfect. So thank you all for making it today. So Alice has kind of already laid out the kind of work we do and the kind of work I'm going to talk about. So I just want to go back a bit and how it all started for me. So. I started as a filmmaker in India, in Ahmedabad. This is Ahmedabad, India, where I'm from. I started as a filmmaker over 15 years ago, shooting films on VHS tape, editing on linear machines, sort of shots of the city, urban landscape, repetition, claustrophobia interlaced with glimpses of hope and desire in the neon landscape. This is a documentary film we made after I finished studying, a nearly silent documentary about Mumbai's hellish suburban journey that sees 7 million commuters struggle to survive on the city's overcrowded train network. I was enamored by the cinematic image, drawn into the stories and lives of people and cities as they played out in the world around me. I'm going to kind of let you just see this last part of the clip because it is quite insane to try and navigate your way through these train journeys where on a regular basis people die. But after having been a practitioner as a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, I wanted to be involved in a more direct investigative practice, and so went on to do my master's in interaction design at the Royal College of Art. But I still made films, and this is an excerpt from a project I did called Yellow Chair Stories, in which I laid out this yellow chair and the sign outside my house offering free Wi-Fi to neighbors and passers-by. It was an attempt to rediscover and reinvent informal meeting spaces for our evolving electronic landscape. I started offering recipes for chicken tikka masala and for cups of chai for whoever came by, free parking spaces and so on, and it slowly started becoming a space for people lots of people to meet, but also for neighbors to come and say that I was ensuring that house prices would fall down because they didn't want such crazy neighbors. After graduating, I was still very fortunate to work with people and organizations where the technology and the way it interfaces in our daily lives was constantly interrogated. But as I looked around me, the predominant visual landscape of emerging technology was full of gloss and shine, from the intimacy of our bodies to our relationships and the places we live and work in, all normalized through a steady stream of beautiful pixels. Where even a quick, badly done mashup, you can barely notice a glitch. Perfect, singular visions designed to speak to our emotional subconscious, creating expectations and desires, framing our view of technology and indeed the future. There was a sort of overbearing assumption that as graduating interaction designers with massive student loans, one would work in the service of this landscape, facilitating and living within the conditions that drive this fictional world. As a designer, I began to get more and more interested in moving outside of the pixel-perfect imagery, to begin to make sense of our alarmingly precarious and uncertain world. Reality is stranger than fiction, and the technological landscape and its implications often too complex to fully comprehend. This is Cujo, a large-scale, fully autonomous robot made by Boston Dynamics, funded by the American military and now acquired by Google. In this video, you see Cujo doing rather well at a test patrol with US Marines. It walked for miles across a difficult terrain, carrying 400 pounds of kit and weapons for over 15 miles. From a large physical robot to an invisible one, a Hong Kong VC fund, Deep Knowledge Ventures, has made Vital a computer algorithm to its board as a board member. Vital can make important investment recommendations by poring over large amounts of data and can even vote on whether the firm makes an investment in a specific company or not. Vital is just a glimpse of how algorithms are beginning to gain autonomy and agency in unexpected ways. Most of you have seen this.
It's called Amazon Echo.
Is it on?
Oh, it's always on. Alexa, what do you do?
I can play music, answer questions, get the news and weather, create to-do lists, and much more.
Alexa, what time is it?
The time is 3:27.
You actually don't have to yell at it, okay? It uses far-field technology so it can hear you from anywhere in the room.
Essentially, a Siri-like personal assistant crammed inside a speaker. We will never be offline again, as machines not just look at us, but listen to everything we say, storing it in a corporate cloud so our most personal, mundane moments of daily life can be farmed for even bigger profits. A lot of this sort of invisible technology began to get visible following the whistleblowing activities of Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, and Chelsea Manning, who exposed the sheer scale of mass surveillance by governments and corporations. Slovak Zizek has written last year, "Whistleblowing is now an essential art. It is our means of keeping public reason alive." A year on, we see its remnants in several things, including this graffiti here in New York. And then, of course, the brief manifestation of these 3D printed caricatures available for $99 show how their whistleblowing activities have now been fully consumed. Another side of this technological landscape are stories of small groups of people creating products that might have perhaps required the brute force of a corporation before. For instance, this is Bento Box, a new DIY laboratory in a box that enables scientists, biotechnologists, artists, and all kinds of curious-minded people to engage with the science anytime. It will allow DNA analysis that could be used for testing organic food at home to identifying genetic fingerprints and diseases. This is the website of a new organization called GeneCoin, who has an absolutely astonishing plan to create a new kind of currency made out of your very own DNA. This currency will be then distributed across the planet using the powerful Bitcoin cryptocurrency network, which apparently is the safest way to store DNA. Whilst this feels so incomprehensible, this is the direction we are moving in now. And finally, we see the rise of another group of people, new kind of guerrilla innovators and super empowering individuals. These are members of the Athens wireless network who are creating their own internet. They started initially as a response to the government's poor internet services, but once the news of mass surveillance spread, lots of members joined their network as people now want to start seeking control over their own networks. It's the very same ethos of guerrilla innovation used by Libyan rebels in what I call Jugaad warfare, where they've started hacking game controllers to control their DIY tankers to fight Gaddafi. As you start digging deeper, you start to see how information itself is political, as those obfuscated by the state use deeply powerful and inspiring ways to create new kinds of access for it. These are members of the Fighters for a Free North Korea, at the border of North and South Korea, about to release 20 feet long, narrow helium balloons towards the north. Each balloon carries a bundle of DVDs, USBs, transistor radios, and tens of thousands of leaflets printed with information about the world outside North Korea. And the sun sets on a group of African migrants on the shore of Djibouti City at night, who raise their phones in an attempt to capture an inexpensive signal from neighboring Somalia, a tenuous link to relatives abroad. Yet another story revealing the age-old tension between political and economic agendas of governments and corporations and the liberties of the marginalized, who have found a new powerful medium in cheap technologies and clever tactics to fight with. But the list goes on. As I began to scratch the surface and started to look around me, I felt it was just the beginning. If you're into this sort of thing, as me and my friends are, you're likely to become overwhelmingly swept away by the torrent of news bites from Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, newsletters, and so on. Drone wars, Minecraft smart cities, wearable solar panels, predicting software, and so on. In a recent essay, Adam Curtis sums up this condition really well. We've got this idea that we have screens all around us, all the time, and we see everything, and we somehow know everything that is happening in the world because it's reported to us 24 hours a day. But actually, we also have a sense that we haven't got the faintest idea of what's going on. The new sensibility at the moment is a sense of isolation and unconnectedness, a sense of what the hell is this all for, and a sense of uncertainty and anxiety. The UK organization Plan C are taking this very seriously. They even have a manifesto called "We Are All Very Anxious." Here's an excerpt from it. In contemporary capitalism, the dominant reactive effect is anxiety. One major part of the social underpinning of anxiety is the multifaceted, omnipresent web of surveillance. The NSA, CCTV, performance management reviews, the job center, the privileges system, in the prisons, the constant examination and classification of the youngest school children. And it goes on. If you are interested, you can check out the website and read the full manifesto. But the most fantastic thing about the present time is that we are all actually still here, William Gibson said in a recent interview. And operating within this context is our little design studio, Superflux. That's my partner John and I, doing a ridiculous photo shoot for the Wired magazine recently. We are designers mostly, interaction designers, strategic designers, technologists, but we are also artists and filmmakers. Our studio operates as a part consultancy or a design shop, helping with future visioning, strategy, product invention for emerging technologies. But there's also a part of us which is a laboratory, where we explore methods, materials, research, and investigate emerging technologies and the broader context within which they live. And today I'm going to focus on talking about the projects we do through our lab. We've set this agenda for the lab because we know that technologies don't exist in isolation. They interact with a rich and complex world and are subject to forces beyond their makers' control. As designers, we believe that it is important to think about the wider field of complexities in order to challenge deeper assumptions about technological power and control. To do this, we create tangible expressions of how our complex technological landscapes might manifest themselves in the near future. But these expressions, whether they are interactive prototypes or stories or films or images, are not so much about the future, but they are more about like lenses with which to view our present. And it's these insights into the granular materiality of our strange presents and alternate futures, and the new perspectives they bring, that we are most interested in. I'll just show you a few projects. So one of the first projects I'd like to share is about the design of augmented prosthetic vision for the visually impaired using optogenetics. It's a kind of technology where it's sort of a gene therapy where they found a protein in an algae in a pond, and they inject this protein in the form of a virus in your brain, and it's able to control single individual neurons in your brain through an external sort of a light switch. But I'm going to let scientist Patrick Dagenar explain.
Patients with retinitis pigmentosa go blind because the light-sensitive cells in their eyes are dysfunctional. The remaining circuitry is, however, intact. In 2003, the discovery of a special light-sensitive protein in algae led to the new field of optogenetics. We can use these special light-sensitive proteins to bring back some form of photosensitivity in the remaining cell layers of the retina. My team is developing a special optoelectronic headset to interpret the world and communicate with these newly light-sensitized cells. It is our hope that with a mixture of optogenetic gene therapy and our headset, that we can return lost vision to these patients.
So that's quite a big task to start using this kind of new invasive gene therapy to return sight. They started using tests, image augmentation tests with their patients to see what might it be like to start to see the world again. They're never going to get full vision. If they're going to get only some vision, what should that be? Should it be the sort of drawn outline? Should it be some sort of cartoonized vision of the world? And so on. However, much to their surprise, most people said, I'd rather be blind than have my world look like this. As scientists, they were approaching it from a very data-driven perspective, whilst as designers, what we often ask is what our experiences of and with technology will feel like, valuing human centricity over efficiency. And so we started working with them, and for us, the most interesting part of the technology was how the body is being modified to better interface with the machine rather than the other way around. And we continued to explore the design for the operating system of this new interface, taking into account the deeper connections between such prosthetics and the brain's most vivid functions, that of memory and consciousness. What if we gave people with this prosthetic the potential to see in areas of the electromagnetic spectrum not visible to the normally sighted? So we actually started working with specialist camera equipment in film and started filming the different spectrums and get a real sense of what the world might look like. Because it's, in a sense, what they're doing is plugging a scarlet to the brain of these visually impaired people, and so they have this super-sighted, the potential to become super-sighted. These are images of me and John trying them out. While the infrared lens gave me white skin and blue eyes, the UV exposed John's misadventures with the sun. And I'd like to show you just short clips of the film we made to show the scientists, who are our main stakeholders, what this world will look like, which they themselves are pioneering. Hampstead Heath in London, which near infrared makes it look really snowy. And this is thermal imaging in the train. Augmented vision And this is really important because this is where we come in. Before a technology becomes a product, how can we influence the design of it? And this, once the stakeholders were engaged in the process, we then started a very practical design process, going through doing ethnography and user research with the patients and participants, and then going on to product invention and continuing the development of the product. Another project I'd like to talk about is quite a small micro project we did last year. We were asked to design a wearable. So we are very interested in everything that's happened post-Snowden, and we started looking at this one thing called Boundless Informant, the program used by NSA and GCHQ to tag everyone's data. So what they do is that they secretly collect and scan all our personal information and correspondence for trigger words, and this is just an example of some of them, from the overtly malevolent anthrax assassination and bomb to the seemingly benign pork, dock, and storm. These revelations have not just exposed excruciating details of this activity, but also confirmed the extraordinary disconnect between the scale and seriousness of what has been revealed and the scale and seriousness of the response. Such techniques in the UK have often been justified with an emotional narrative of safety. William Hague, UK's foreign minister, in response to Snowden's revelation, remarked, "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." Statements like this act to control the narrative around surveillance and close down public debate on the complexities of the issue. Our response, Open Informant, wants to confront this narrative. It's a phone app and an e-ink badge that searches your communications for NSA trigger words and then sends text fragments containing these words to the badge for public display. In a sense, transforming what was taken from us by stealth into an open public protest. Here's a short video just showing how the artifact works. And of course, nobody in London cares whatever you're wearing. It just doesn't matter. And there's a GitHub link in case anyone wants to look. Could we confuse the algorithms if everyone started using these trigger words more and more and more? Anyway, it was a short project. Also interested in how wearable technology is not just about us and our own bodies, but also about the culture of algorithmic monitoring. So moving on to a slightly different topic, the next project is situated in the UK and is very much within the context of, as Alice mentioned, NHS, Free National Healthcare, which we've had for over 16 years and is a point of great pride. This is how it all started.
This leaflet is coming through your letterbox one day soon. Or maybe you've already had your copy. The new National Health Service starts, providing hospital and specialist services, medicines, drugs and appliances, care of the teeth and eyes, maternity services. Ask your doctor now if he'll look after you under the new scheme. Now don't forget, choose your doctor now.
It's great. But for the last few years, there's been a trend towards privatization through stealth, where before we even realize different parts of the NHS are slowly getting privatized, and there has been a huge amount of protest, but I don't think there's much going to happen about it. Where there's privatization, big data is not far behind. Many nations, including the UK, are creating DNA databases of entire populations, not just criminals. For instance, UK's Caldecott Committee proposed new rules for data sharing, which would allow the government to build a DNA database of the whole population of England in the National Health Service by stealth, which many have likened to the idea of a genetic panopticon. DNA has immense commercial value and is beginning to get monetized in new ways. The California-based personal genomics company 23andMe recently announced that they have been granted a patent for a technology that supports their family traits inheritance calculator, which would allow couples to check online the traits they would like their child to have. So apart from a child's eye color and earwax consistency, you can also select a child with the longest expected lifespan over least expected life cost of healthcare. This rise of genomics in healthcare will mean individualized treatments and development of new genetic therapies. But this is also being closely watched by insurance companies and pharmaceuticals seeking to profit from our very own genetic materials. On the other hand, you see the extreme measures people already undergo in order to secure even basic health care. This 59-year-old man who has been jailed here in the US on charges of larceny after allegedly robbing an RBC bank for $1 so he could get health care in prison. With a growth in his chest, 2 ruptured discs and no job, Veron hoped a 3-year stint in prison would afford him the health care he needed. Our project, Dynamic Genetics versus Man, is a project where we explore some of these economic and political implications of synthetic biology, genomics, and gene therapy. It is located in the UK and centers around a near-future fictional court case between Dynamic Genetics, a multinational biotech corporation, who accuses the unremarkable Arnold Mann of obtaining unlicensed copies of the company's patented gene therapies. Let me show you just some of the 31 pieces of evidence we created for this court case. This is the leaflet and sample kit from the DNA mapping department of the newly formed National Health Insurance Service, which was previously the National Health Service. Mann was one of the privileged few to be selected for a first round of genetic sampling for the new government database. This is the mandatory spit kit sent by the NHI that will ensure that it has the database of all the full population, and Arnold was one of the first few people to get it. This is the letter from Arnold's DNA results showing that the algorithm has classified him as healthy and comfortably average. But further down, a short caveat, there were some elevated risk indicators. Few months passed by, and then his NHI contributions bill arrives, which shows that those risky genes had bumped his annual health insurance from £247 to £6,127.20, an unaffordable amount for a man already living at the edge of his means. This is the cost-benefit algorithm used by the government to calculate every individual's insurance contributions based on potential healthcare costs associated with their genome. So every time your sample was done, if they found that you were likely to have heart diseases, your insurance would be bumped up. This is a covert surveillance photograph from inside a black market clinic showing Mann getting an illegal gene therapy treatment done that would alter his genetic composition so that his insurance bills would go down again. His treatment was apparently done by using the stolen Dynamic Genetics patented vials as source material. And these are a batch of counterfeit therapies found in the clinic. A forensic photograph documenting the layout of the crime scene. On the right, you see an improvised CO2 incubator used in the manufacture of illegal genetic therapies. This is a detail of the therapy. Boxes containing mice, which appear to have been used as test subjects. Sections of the defendant's machine-readable DNA with matches to Dynamic Genetics copyright material highlighted in yellow. Newspaper articles showing how the government does not support such black market practices around gene therapy. And footage documenting the defendant's interrogation. The lens of the court case as a superfiction mirroring real-world organizations helped construct a powerful narrative to expose the story of a vulnerable citizen who goes to extreme measures to mitigate the impact of healthcare costs. Here's how our detailed and carefully crafted body of evidence looked. each exploring the politics of power and control in a troublingly familiar future world. Piece together these evidential fragments, question ethical, political, and economic implications of innovations in biotechnology that are quietly transforming our world. And finally, the last project I want to share is a work in progress called the Drone Aviary. We are currently exploring the emergent cultural significance of the civilian drone and its identity as an object of power. Today, the word drone is a heavily loaded term, simultaneously a mascot of risk transfer militarism, an object of celebrity's obsession, and a DIY enthusiast's dream. However, whilst technological wonder and privacy fears are polarizing opinion, there's little real contemplation on how these machines will change our experiences of the urban environment and the way we interact and understand algorithmic intelligence. That's because all drones carry the burden that comes with being an instrument of tremendous power. Because of their ability to move unimpeded through three-dimensional space, obtaining unique vantage points, collecting data from those vantage points, and acting upon the power afforded by that data. And that's the bit that interests us. Our project is an investigation of what happens when machine intelligence finds a body and begins to occupy the sky above our heads. Because as J.M. Ledyard said, we talk about atmosphere, stratosphere, airspace, but none of the words say much about the porousness between the rooftops and the clouds, the bit of the sky we breathe, walk through, and look out upon. And so we set about in the studio, getting under the hood of the technology to truly understand what these machines are like, building every part of the drone in-house rather than buying off-the-shelf drones. That's Dylan there, who's sitting right there, who worked with us on the project. We also created a philology of the drones, seeing their historic origins from RC copters on one side and military use on the other side. Besides the tech, the form that these machines take also becomes very important. How do we design their aesthetic to move beyond the visible quadcopter image we see around? In the first instantiation, we are designing 5 drones and giving each of them unique identities. By giving them form and identity, we want to start creating a visceral connection with these new species as they start sniffing the environment, roaming our skies, and performing tasks with increasing autonomy. This is the first drone, Night Watchman surveillance drone. First deployed in London in 2019, these roving semi-autonomous CCTV platforms became popular with the city's local authorities by providing not just a cheap alternative to human patrolling, but also giving a revenue boost for fining for community and antisocial behavior violations. Route Hawk traffic management quadcopter. With close to 3 dozen Route Hawks being operated across the smart city, these mobile traffic cameras help manage congestion, cut down road accidents, and car crime. Madison, the floating billboard, whose strength, apart from its eye-catching 360-degree LED display, is its highly targeted approach to advertising. Constantly scanning crowds and analyzing them in terms of demographics, it positions itself to provide maximum exposure and deliver highly personalized marketing to individuals. We also started investigating the new vertical and digital infrastructures within which these machines will need to operate. So Amazon has the primary idea, where recently they had to file a permission again with the FAA so that their drones could fly, once they've convinced them that they will create geofences so that their drones will not be able to fly above 400 feet. So these are sort of digital boundaries for their drones. Phantom DJI, another consumer drone, creates a geofence within 15 kilometers of the Tiananmen Square, and also now 360 airports around the world. So we started sketching the frameworks for these new digital infrastructures, the flight zones and the flight paths as seen by a drone. Unlike an air traffic control map where all flights fly above the cities, we needed to think of a map where drones sometimes fly through the cities and quite often close to buildings and people. This is the map we are now developing. This is not a factual diagram. It's our way of giving excruciating detail to a system that will need to be in place even if few drones were flying. By 2016, they say there are going to be 30,000 drones in the US skies. By giving this invisible infrastructure form, we want everyone to look at it and wonder, what exactly are we signing up to? A close-up reveals the various zones that each drone will need to fly within, also shows flight direction, charging stations, launching pads, things that will need to be in place for such a machine to operate in our sky. And now I'm going to show you a short film we've made showing the point of view of the 3 drones. It's still work in progress, but this is what we have right now.
There is no program of mass surveillance and there is no surveillance state.
I'm very interested in drones. Actually, I would like my life to be run by drones.
Orange Horizon, physical metaphor of our philosophy and ambition to see the world in a new light, to create an emotional connection with the raw weirdness of our times. So, thank you very much.
It was amazing. Thank you so much for starting that with us. It's it's more depressed right now. Sorry. First, I just wanted. I think we've got a very good sense of how you address things that are in flux, and there's also the fluidity between the commercial aspects of your work and the conceptual aspects of your work. But we haven't talked much about super yet, and I think it's a really interesting word, and it came up a lot in your talk about this kind of augmentation of certain qualities, whether that's sight or, it's kind of turning up the dial in a way. Just wondered if you talk about your choice of that word, and whether it connects back to Super Studio as well.
It does. So I think now I can look at their work a bit more critically, but at that point I was enamored 6 years ago as an interaction design student by Super Studio, and to be honest, I needed to, if I wanted to be a freelancer, I needed a company and I needed to have a name, and I knew I needed to have super in it. So that is just the honest fact of that. But so kind of trying to stick to that in some way if we can.
But just to remind, what were the qualities of Super Studio at that time that attracted you?
I think this kind of, objects beyond borders, and this whole idea of creating visions of the world where we start to see technology in not just unexpected ways, but the critique of the walls that we create. Like we will not design any objects, and that whole sort of nature of turning product design or architecture upside down with a bit of critique. So, for instance, Archigram was around that same time, and I do love Archigram's work as well. But there was this real optimism, that the technocratic optimism almost in Archigram, while Super Studio was a bit more critical in their work. I think, if I'm not wrong. So I think that's kind of what inspired us.
Yeah, so I see some of these kind of disorientating landscapes that you can consider. Okay, so a part of that reminded me of the way in which you, using the super, turning to that little, you're using this very specific near future, right? Because it's not far future, it's close enough to touch, but yet it's not quite painful enough to be a critique right now. How do you choose the sort of time frames?
Interesting. I mean, we can't. Earlier we would say this is set in 2020, and now we're trying to avoid that. So we're trying to avoid using a year completely from our work. So some people think it's happening now. With dynamic genetics, lots of people have come and said, oh, it's happening already, or it's about to happen. And in a way, a bit like science fiction, where you're not really talking about future, it's a comment on the present. And so, as I said earlier, it is not so much about, it's the consequence on our present lives that we are most interested in, and we use this as a lens to talk about it. So sometimes it can be far future, sometimes not. Time is sort of elastic in that sense.
Yeah, and I have one more question before we bring the students into this. I mean, you've been hogging you, but I love that the film work you did at the beginning in India. I mean, that was stunning, wasn't it? It's just so incredible capturing that intense sort of mass of humanity. Do you still work in India in any capacity, and how does that influence what you do in India?
We do, in a sense that we do research work there. We don't like we started a research project which was very much around grassroots climate change and stuff. So there is a connection. I have family there. I'm from there, so I have to visit home. I like to visit. And so, but now this year we're doing another project around the spacecraft, India's Mars mission, and I'm going to take that probe to the streets and start talking to people what it means to have the Mars, a probe in Mars. But I think it's just the perspective that it brings as we move between the two countries and how we can sort of bring some of those influences here. So it's not very direct, but in different ways. Yeah.
Great. critical. Let's oh, actually, I'll do it one more. Sorry, I just noticed my one I actually written down, and that's this. We didn't really address it very much, but one of the critiques of critical design often comes up. I think you acknowledged it yourself in previous discussions. Is the way in which sometimes it feels like it's talking within an echo chamber situation. So often the work is displayed in a gallery context or at a festival. Two other like-minded designers who already get it. What's your plan to escape that?
It's definitely a plan. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons I don't call myself a critical designer or a speculative designer or someone who does design fiction. I just say I'm a designer. And one thing is we have a consultancy through which we do work that goes out in the world, and we are signed under lots of NDAs. We can never talk about it. But very much the plan is to get out of the echo chamber. So our challenge currently is how do we get out of the echo chamber and how do we increase our scale? By scale, I don't mean the number of people we work with, but in terms of how far our projects can reach beyond galleries and museums. So we never start by making a piece of work for a museum or a gallery, but that's where it finds itself. What are the other places it can find itself? And I think, and I've said this before, and I feel quite powerless actually, because even though being autonomous means we can get to do the work we do, but because we are autonomous and we are small, we don't really have any influence in the way, so we end up being seen in museums and galleries and by people. But if we were to infiltrate a sort of a mass, a more popular space, how would we find the power to do that? And what would move forward? Would it be the yes men kind of pranksterism, which we love their work, but we don't do that kind of work? What is the way in which we can start talking about things that are quite complex, but in a way that people beyond their echo chamber get? And that's actually a big question for us right now. Yeah, I don't have answers.
No,
but yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
All right then, students. Okay.
You mentioned you're going to be doing a project on the Mars, India Mars mission. I'm particularly interested in this idea of frontiers and territories, and wondering kind of if is that going to factor into that project, and do you have thoughts on like what it means to add a territory to the nesting kind of thing?
I might do now. We should have a chat. I'm really very interested because in India there's a lot of critique for the Mars mission because it's been very expensive and you could have used this money elsewhere. But compared to the rest of the space budget, it's really cheap. And so I'm interested in what does it mean for people on the streets to have a probe orbiting the Mars. What does it actually mean? What does that mean in terms, because we've grown up with satellites, like literally as children, because we had we had only one television network and it was coming via inset satellite B, and so every time you'd have this thing come up that this satellite is broadcasting this television program, and there's a lot of educational programs around it. So that's a territory in the sense more about what does democratization of space mean, rather than look this new frontier, but possibly in conversations that might come out.
I'm wondering if you have any concerns about some of these scenarios that you are describing actually taking place because you've described them. I'm particularly thinking of the DNA and the health insurance, which to me, if I were a health insurer, I'd be thinking, that's a really good idea. So, I mean, it's interesting to put these ideas out there so they can be discussed, but I can also see them being appropriated. Is this something you
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, probably is already right now, to be honest. It's there's a lot of, so say for instance, you have some rare disease, you need a gene therapy for it, it can cost millions. And so the whole thing, the way we're going, there was this court case last year about a pharmaceutical company trying to patent the 2 breast cancer genes so that they could create the cure for it, and every time nobody else could create the cure. It's actually what we do in the scenario is picking up on these weak signals and these trends quite often. So yes, it could be, but I think they're way ahead of us, those who are thinking of those ideas already, I think. But there's always going to be a chance that somebody takes it up to profit from it. But, yeah.
Are you familiar with the television series Black Mirror? So I'm wondering, like, you're a filmmaker yourself, so you could have just done a film version of Black Mirror, but how does, I guess my question is, how does design bring in an element to your projects that film cannot?
It's a very good question.
I suppose some of the thing is quite so Black Mirror is the film and everybody watches it, and I think there's a part of the medium that's really powerful. But I think what we are also doing is that there's much more direct engagement with the object. It's of course limited to the people who have to be in that space, but sometimes that object can be appropriated and used and consumed in different ways that the film may not be able to. So I think so design fiction has become very much film, like at least corporations think it's film and they make those videos that I just showed. So I suppose film is a medium, but for different purposes there might be different mediums. So sometimes the film works, and it is an ambition to make a film where we use our own prototypes at scale. That would be great.
I was curious about the last project, which was Nagari, and given the fact that you grew up in India, when you're meeting people and getting noticed there is such a big issue, and the fact that 3% of people don't pay income tax, and there's this huge informal economy, that having grown up with something like that, and then kind of addressing the more, let's say, Western modern circles, I'm just wondering how you sort of balance that in your head, or if how you kind of design for that.
I mean, yes, this is very much a UK specific, and looking at all the things that are happening right now. I think in India, it's the loophole economy. It will take over, and I cannot imagine. I mean, they tried the ID card system. I think it's sort of taken 10 years to get that sorted, and I don't even know if it's still working. And so it's on. So I think drones in India would already there a lot. They're using it for many sorts of like social disasters and stuff like that. But I don't think that sort of scale of mass surveillance is likely for a while anyway, just because we just don't have the capacity for it, like infrastructure for it.
Just thinking about the work we've done in Ravi, obviously part of the program you're coming out of. One of the things I think is really interesting about their work is that they come in with a provocation, and then the charm is sort of seeing how the audience responds in unexpected ways to that provocation, and that becomes the project, right? So the thing itself, it's the reaction people have to the thing. And I'm just interested in how you, to what extent you come in with a point of view on the projects, and to what extent you respond dynamically to the way that people are reacting to projects.
Interesting. So definitely point of view. I mean, design is political as much as technology is political. So we're not, we want to reveal the messiness of a technology or whatever, but with a point of view. We've had a project I didn't show was around synthetic bees, where we created artificial bees to show that in a world where there are no bees anymore, we'll use these machines to pollinate. And that brought about a lot of debate, and we got lots of emails from people. And that does not mean we're going to change the debate or change the design of the project. It just means that it is capturing that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to provoke people. But it's also quite interesting, because we also work as a studio, that many times some of these ideas infiltrate into the commercial shop, and we are surprised at the kind of people who contact us to work with want some of this thinking. So it's not always about putting it in an exhibit space for us. It's also about how some of these ideas can start infiltrating into the real world in different ways. So that with the Song of the Machine, it's more about the scientists. With the drone aviary, it is. So right now we are having conversations with really weird people who are doing legal frameworks around drones, people who are just pilots wanting to talk, just kind of engaging with all these different groups of people who are also thinking about this technology. So I think it's different ways in which, because not all our projects end up in a gallery. So.
Right, but I suppose you may be asking about the idea that if you got people's reactions with the process of making,
would you change it? Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Sometimes we do. Sometimes it totally depends on the nature of the project. For instance, I can't think of one done in Ravi project which was modified because of any kind of feedback from, it's very much a perfected final aesthetic that is presented, and that's the kind of thing. It may become another project, feedback or something. In our instance, if it's an ongoing project, if there's funding to support the project, we could try and make a new version of it, which in this instance we might. But and sometimes it's difficult to do that.
You just mentioned that we started with a point of view and that designs were political. Before you said they were very autonomous. So I was just curious to what extent were autonomous in terms of funding, projects.
Very good question. Not autonomous. Maybe I should take back my words. We try and fight. So, for instance, with the Drone Aviary project, we applied for a grant to the arts organization in the UK. We won the grant, but we needed to find another corporate sponsor. And the commissioners, much later in the project, quite recently found a corporate sponsor who insisted on using their material as product placement on the drone, which would completely ruin the project. It would make it would be like flying chandeliers, kind of a thing. You can guess. So we didn't do it. You can guess who the sponsor might be. Yes. And we still have boxes of crystals in the studio, but lots of boxes of crystals in the studio. But we just couldn't embellish the drones with crystals. I find it hard even to say that sentence because it's being recorded. I hope you take that offline. It was really hard. It was very gutting because we ended up not doing the project. It was meant to be part of a big show at the V&A Museum in September. We were all geared up for it. Dylan was in the studio. It was crazy. And so we've suffered a lot financially and sort of, in terms of our perseverance and commitment, but we stuck to it because the only thing we had in this project was our creative vision. And we are not completely autonomous because still somebody might come in and the location where it's shown next will determine. But we can. With a client project, it's much harder. We fight even then, but it's harder. And naturally, they are the ones who have the money and they can control that,
Yeah, I'm a little bit searching for words, so I really appreciate your work. That made it incredible. I was wondering if you have already encountered a project on which you thought, I want to take more executive action on this, or on which you yourself maybe felt I can maybe, so this is a long-term vision I project. Is there some way for me to start maybe on a lower level and execute it myself? What got me thinking about this, I'm from the Netherlands, there's a company in Holland which is called Fairphone. Yes. And it basically started off from this very initial idea of a big problem in our society that we wanted to change. And basically he just started it off, and it's quite impressive how far they got already. Could this be a future path for your company as well?
Yes. So we are doing a project which is called the Internet of Things Academy. It was named a couple of years ago. I forget the name, but the idea is that it is about critiquing how large data set, incomprehensible data sets, and the idea of smart cities is coming top down from governments and corporations, and this is more of a platform to encourage literacy as well as critique and engagement around what it means to actually control your data. So we're prototyping that. We're creating sensors that, so ground level air pollution is the worst in cities, and that affects infants and toddlers more than anyone. So it's 80% of the air pollution is ground level. And so we're creating a set of sensor kits that would allow parents and carers to monitor and measure that kind of air pollution. So in a sense, that it's a very practical project, and the idea is not that you want to change, but we hope that in the long term there will be policy change because of the data collected, and the data is not going to be big data, but it's going to be a sort of surrogate for the passion of a community who believes that things need to change. So there are those kinds of initiatives, but by and large, once the project is up and running, we might take a step back, because we don't think we are the people who want to run with one idea for 15 years or 20 years as a startup. That's a decision we've made, unless something really crazy captures us. But we want to give birth to ideas, shape them, and then let them go.
Well, I think we should go and soothe our anxieties with a glass of wine next door. But before we do that, please join me in thanking Anab.